On Monday, I took a trip at an obscenely early hour to Derby, specifically to Alstom's Litchurch Lane Works. Now, we've been here before when I made my video on the Greatest Gathering earlier this year. But today, Alstom invited me for a very specific reason. They're building trains for the Elizabeth line. Now, the trains themselves are nothing new. Well, obviously they are physically new, but they are 10 more of the Class 345 units that are running on the Elizabeth line right now. They are part of the Aventra family of trains, which are in use on many rail networks across the country. I've talked about the 345s a fair few times on this channel, partly because I find them interesting, and partly because videos about the Elizabeth line tend to do pretty well. Jago gotta eat, son. I think they are comfortable and spacious trains, their main flaw being that they have to fulfill the functions of both a short-distance, intensively used metro train and a longer-distance main line train, and so include a number of compromises. Still, they have proven themselves, and the Elizabeth line itself has far exceeded even optimistic expectations. Earlier this year, back in September, it surpassed 1 million passengers in a single day. And it looks like it could be reshaping the city. A bit, at least. See, everything is connected. There's a massive demand for housing in London, but in order to get new housing approved, you need adequate transport links. Otherwise, you end up with a situation like in Thamesmead, where the intended transport links were never built, and the town of the future was a flop. Many of the homes that have received planning permission, over 70,000 of them, are close to Elizabeth line stations. There has also been a drastic increase in the number of people working near the Elizabeth line. 125,000 new jobs were registered in the first year of operation, within a kilometre of Elizabeth line stations. The cheapest and simplest measure is to increase the capacity of the line. Of course, adding trains comes with its own issues. As you may be aware, the core section of the Elizabeth line is already intensively worked, and the question is, where in the timetable will 10 more trains fit? Paddington in particular is a complicated station to work even now. So that's the next challenge. I can see this becoming a bit of a cat-and-mouse game. Demand for the line increases, so the line gets upgraded, so the demand increases, and so on. And I haven't even touched on the effects of High Speed 2, which will connect with the Elizabeth line at Old Oak Common. This is part of a wider programme of investment in the Transport for London network. The Piccadilly line is getting new trains, and the Central line trains are receiving desperately needed renewal. In the longer term, projects like replacing the elderly Bakerloo line fleet and the extension of the Docklands Light Railway to Thamesmead are in the queue. But this isn't just about London. Litchurch Lane Works is a major employer, but back in 2023 it was at risk of closure, largely due to the government dithering over train orders for High Speed 2 in the wake of the cancellation of that line's northern leg. Over half the employees on site took redundancy. Things were looking bleak. This contract, as well as one to refurbish units for cross-country, has removed that risk for the time being, and the future is looking pretty optimistic. They talked about some interesting future projects. One that piqued my curiosity was the Cairo monorail. It's a long time since we've had a monorail factory in this country. But on a wider scale, Britain used to export locomotives, rolling stock and expertise all over the world, and I am all for bringing that back. The first of these new Elizabeth line trains will likely be entering service in late 2026. The train you see under construction here is number 71. Have you ever wondered what an Elizabeth line train looks like before fitting out? Well, here you go. Alstom pride themselves on the fact that Litchurch Lane is the only works in the country capable of carrying out the entire construction process from start to finish. Although, historically speaking, this is nothing new. The Derby works were built by the Midland Railway back in 1876. In those days, all the major railway companies did everything in-house. Derby, Swindon, Crewe, Eastleigh and many others all had their own all-in-one works facilities. On the subject of doing everything in-house, we were introduced to Train Zero. Now, with a name like that, and the fact that journalists had hitherto not been allowed into this part of the facility, I assumed it was a scary experimental prototype whose motors accidentally opened a portal to another dimension or something. It turns out that actually it's a kind of virtual train rig. Modern trains are as heavy on electronics as they are on mechanics, and Train Zero is a recreation of those electronics for testing and fault finding. I don't envy the engineer who has to find a fault in that lot, but I suppose it's easier to figure potential pitfalls and problems out here than on a completed train. Now, when I was invited to the factory, I assumed that this was just going to be a case of talking about the new trains and what they're for and how they're built. But if you'll permit me to get on my soapbox once again, I feel like this highlights the importance and usefulness of investing in rail. Not only in London, despite what some people in my comments section seem to think, but everywhere. The Elizabeth Line has driven economic development, with new jobs and new homes springing up in response to this new transport link. The need for the construction and maintenance of trains has created work at Litchurch Lane, and that in turn enables Alstom to take on other projects. Building trains isn't all that goes into a railway. There's track, signalling, stations, sidings, bridges, tunnels. They all need their own facilities, and they all need people to keep them going. London isn't the only city, and Litchurch Lane isn't the only railway works. Widespread investment could bring benefits for the whole country, both direct and indirect, on the rails and off. I see people in other cities complaining about insufficient public transport, and they're right to do so. You can't talk about levelling the country up without talking transport. It's not just a question of convenience or environmentalism, though those are both valid arguments. It is the proverbial rising tide that lifts all boats. Or trains, if you like. In short, it's not just us train nerds that benefit from more trains. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I was going to talk a bit about the historic works themselves and why they exist where they do, but as I was writing the script I felt like that aspect of it kind of got away from me. In other words, look out for a video about that in the future if that's something you'd like to see. I would like to thank Alstom for inviting me up, and I'd also like to thank the folks from TfL, the Mayor's Office, and GTS Rail Operations for providing me with much of the information that went into this video and for answering my questions. I would also like, as ever, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the body panels to my underframe. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.